We're here with Ben Frazier, founding president of the Northside Coalition. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good to be here with you, Charles.
All right, so tell me, what is it that the Northside Coalition is all about?
The Northside
I want to get
Coalition,
into some
very
personal stuff with you.
straightforwardly and simple and to the point. We are a civil rights organization. We are active, we are vocal. It is our message and our mission to stand up and to speak out against any and all forms of social, racial, and economic injustice. That's what this is about.
So as a founder of this organization, you saw the need to grow, to work in this space. Why was that?
Well, actually, we got our founding when I went to a service station and a lady was being discriminated against in front of me. I chastised the management and ownership of the station, started an economic boycott, and succeeded in getting them to capitulate to 4 of our demands for the community's best interest. That's how the organization started, because we were standing up and speaking out against racial injustice.
So now that you're working in the community and you're working on injustices, where do you see the real opportunity for change?
The real opportunity for change? Well, I think that we have a wonderful opportunity to address the issue of trust, transparency, and accountability as it relates to law enforcement. Most of the surveys taken clearly indicate that there is a trust issue between the Black community and JSO. Many of the police who come to our community come to the community as warriors, not as servants who are sworn to serve and to protect. They come to the community, unfortunately, as strangers in a strange land. They speak a different language. They don't understand the language being spoken. And sometimes they come to a situation that they could de-escalate, but unfortunately gets escalated beyond belief. There are numerous instances of excessive use of violence and force, patterns of systemic and structural and institutional racism in terms of policies, practices, and procedures by a local police department, which is JSO. We can do better than that. We must do better than that. In the words of James Baldwin, we can change it if we face it, but we must face the challenge and the reality that there is a problem. We have one major problem, that many of the people who are policing the Black community live in faraway places. They know nothing about community policing. They never get out of the cruiser or the police car to talk with the people that they are in fact policing. For example, there are 1,500 sworn police officers in this city. Only 300 of them, less than 15% of them, are Black. So then you have white folks policing Black folks, white folks who live in Baldwin, the Beaches, and Mandarin, coming to zip codes 32206 on the east side, 08 and 09 on the north side, to police people that they kind of don't relate to. We've got to be able to get more Black police officers. It's only fair in a city that is 31% Black that there be more than 300 police officers. We have 285,000 Black people who live here. We deserve to have better representation. To your point, what can we do better? We can start by hiring more police officers who are people of color. And we must stop making excuses that we can't find them. We need to be much more creative in our effort to reach out and recruit people to police this community.
Now, if you were talking to, your point's well taken, if you were talking to JSO, they may argue that the policies that they have in place are there to protect the peacekeepers, the officers themselves, and not necessarily the law is there for citizens not to break, but the policies for police officers in terms of criminal justice reform, because you know how difficult it is to have officers to be held accountable in situations where we as a community may believe they've overstepped their boundaries in terms of enforcement. Those policies tend to lean towards law enforcement because they need to in order to protect themselves from things that go on in the community, stay safe. How do you reconcile that with the changes that need to be made to have better relationships with people in the community? In other words, law enforcement people would say, just don't break the law and no one will get hurt.
We recognize that the issue of racist policies, practices, and procedures actually go back to the very formation of police departments to begin with. They were formed as either vigilante groups or slave-catching groups designed to retrieve blacks who had run away from the plantation. Therein lies the first part of this problem. We have to be honest and to recognize that there are a multitude of disparities as it relates to blacks in the criminal justice system. Some of these disparities are spelled out in a book called Policing the Black Man by Angela Davis. Another one I think about is by a man named Sean Butler called The Chokehold. What we're talking about is disparities from arrest to sentencing that are clearly racially disparate. We understand that we get shot more than white folks. Blacks are 5 times more likely to be shot. We are arrested more than white folks, not anywhere of parity with regards to our population numbers. In terms of sentencing, we are sentenced to greater sentence times than whites. It goes on and on and on. Nothing is lost on the point that the police officer or first responder who is out there policing wants to come home to his family. We understand that. But unfortunately, so much of policing the black community has centered on the destruction of the black family. Many of the problems we have are centered on mental health. For example, mental health calls account for about 70% of the calls of police. So then why are we putting more money into state-of-the-art technology? Why are we trying to hire more police officers when we need to start talking about getting mental health care professionals to go out with them on some of these calls?
So where's that conversation going? Have you had any success trying to have that conversation? It almost sounds like you're trying to upset the paradigm of law enforcement, right? And you're trying to disrupt that. Traditionally, people feel safer when they hear words like enforcement. That's what the community at large, according to the way we voted, right, wants to maintain. But how do you get people to buy into prevention and intervention?
Well, the bottom line here is that we just have to be honest and to recognize this, despite all of our best efforts, we're failing. It's epic failure. Despite all the new programs, it's epic failure. It hasn't worked. We have to be honest that we need to be creative and to try something different. We need to address this premise, this argument, that there is in fact a direct connection, if you will, an inextricable link, if you will, between poverty, unemployment, economic degradation, gun violence, and crime. Folks, there is no mystery that in zip code 32209, where most of the murders are committed, that in some 10-block census areas, 50% of the people are living below the federal poverty guidelines. These people don't have jobs. We're suggesting that there is a direct connection. How do you expect to reduce gun violence if all you have is people walking around with nothing to do? We've got to be honest when upsetting that norm of gun violence, interrupting it. We've got to address some issues like economic injustice. We must begin to empower our communities. There needs to be, in Jacksonville, for example, more condos on Sutel. There are none. There are no sit-down restaurants. There are no movie theaters. What the heck is going on? I'll tell you what's going on. Redlining is real. It goes back to the 30s. The misallocation, misappropriation of city funds has gone on not just for several mayoral administrations, but for several generations. These communities that I speak of, Magnolia Gardens, Floridale, Grand Park, Moncrief, these are marginalized areas that have been ignored, unacknowledged, and handled in the most ingracious way, literally for generations. It's time for us to be honest. It's time for us to end the old boy politics. It's time for us to use some creative leadership. And that is where the issues lie.
If I am, to your point, these communities definitely suffer, right? I grew up there. We know people who've grown up in these communities and have made it out. But if I live at the beach, if I live in Mandarin, if I live, near St. Johns County, why do I care what happens in '08 and '09 and '06? What is in it for me if these communities are left, if I'm going to invest in bringing them up to speed?
I think that's a very good question.
What is in it for me?
I would suggest to you that for so long, Jacksonville has been a sleepy southern town. Magnolias, live oak trees with Spanish moss hanging down, and they have mistreated and handled black people in a way that is clearly unfair. My only suggestion is that we end the corruption, end the cronyism, and start to treat people like everybody wants to be treated. Most of us want to have our own house, our own car, to raise our children in peace. I am here to suggest to you that it is time to end the Civil War. It is time for us to march into the sunlight of a brand new day and become a city that is too busy to hate. You have a stake in the person in 32206, 08, and 09 living a life that is good. We don't need to simply be concerned about major luxury hotels in the Everbank area. We need to take the same $500 million, put it on the north side, and watch the city blossom and grow.
So what you're saying is that citizens, no matter where you live, should have a moral obligation to address injustice wherever it may be in the community.
It must be that kind of egalitarian belief. It's not just altruism. It is about being fair and wanting to see your neighbors exist and to raise their families in peace. Why not? Doesn't that sound like a good idea? That does sound reasonable, doesn't it?
Yeah, I understand morality and humanity, but let's face it, there are people in our community who either figure or see morality in a different way,
yes,
right? Or have different interpretations of how humanity should be.
Listen, cut it to the chase. Some people are racist. cut it to the chase. There's some people who believe in the myth of white supremacy, and that is to say that they are better than you or I
And so therefore,
simply
why
because
should
of
they
the
care
color of their skin.
And why should they care what's
Come
going
on, man. What we're talking about here is character. I am here to suggest to you that I am so naive as to believe that character counts, that we need to be concerned about integrity. We need to be concerned about core values like honesty, like good old-fashioned treat your neighbor like you yourself want to be treated, like let's talk it out, not shoot it out. Let's just be fair to each other. Is that simply naive? That I long for a city where people get up in the morning and say good morning and good afternoon on the street? Is it wrong for me to want to interrupt the norm of violence in this city, to ask where are all these guns coming from? Nobody has answered that question. Where are all these drugs coming from? No one has answered that question. I'm suggesting to you that we need to be creative and that we need the kind of leadership in this city that says there is a way out. I believe in faith and not fear. Am I naive? I say that we can, as a city, work together to overcome these issues and make this city a better place for us all to live.
Okay. So what is the Northside Coalition doing right now? What's the major project you're working on that you'd like the community to know about and to get involved in?
What we're working on is what we call our Boots on the Ground Canvassing Campaign for Peace in zip code 32209, the zip code where most murders occur in the state of Florida. We are messaging, let's talk it out, not shoot it out. We think it's necessary to attempt to resolve conflicts by talking with each other. We think that we need to initiate a multimedia campaign that has Stop the Violence on city buses and bus benches. We think that we need to have a multimedia campaign that talks about word of mouth, that we meet each other not with good morning, but with stop the violence in the morning, stop the violence in the afternoon. How you doing? Stop the violence. We've got to interrupt this norm of violence in this city. And we can't do it by simply looking the other way and acting as if it does not exist. We must address the issue. That is what we are doing. We need more money to see whether we can get this message out and to talk with our young people, to mentor our young people, to give them the kind of education they need to end the housing and healthcare and education disparities that are challenging us. We think that we can do it community by community, neighborhood by neighborhood, house by house, and person by person. We think that we can do it. We are positive in this belief.
Thank you for your beliefs. Ben Frazier, President, Northside Coalition. Thank you for being here, my friend.
Thank you very much for having us.